Often, when I'm going to make a baby trip around the world, I pick a really cute fabric and then I go and choose fabrics to go with it. I like to have 7 to 10. 9 is my favorite number. So right now I'm looking for blues and I like to have 2 or 3 of each color. For this quilt, I'm going to go for 3. So I want to have 3 blues that can be friends and hold hands and take their trip around the world together. I think these 3 will be a great fit. They look nice, they are happy together, so time to pick yellow. As I choose the yellow, I'm looking at the lion and I'm getting yellow for his body and I want a darker gold for his mane. And everything I find feels too bright, too not what I'm looking for. And so I just want you to see the process. It's a little messy. You might drop something, but I keep the fabric that I want to choose my fabric from right with me so I can see that it's a happy one to do. This fabric would have been great. It just, there wasn't enough fabric there. I cut my strips 3.5 inches and need 3 of them. So I need enough fabric that's the full width of fabric and that I can cut 3.5 inches from, and that one didn't have the full width of fabric. But it's okay because I have enough beautiful fabric that I find the perfect gold. And after I find the perfect gold, and this is it, then I want one more yellow. So because my first yellow is light and the second yellow I picked is darker, I try to find one that will go in the middle. And that was just easy. I found it right away. So 3 yellows and I'm happy. After I get my 3 yellows, then I decide what other color I want. And do I want black? Do I want pink? Do I want to go with the green of the trees? It's really a choice, and there's not a right or wrong answer. So as I look at this and ponder, I have 6 already. I need 3 more fabrics. I'm going to go into the black and white family. And ta-da! I'm not even going to make you sit and watch. There they are. I picked them. So black and white, there's a total of 9. They look good. Let's go cut them out. Before we cut them out, however, if it's really wrinkly and really awful, I like my strips to be smooth because we're going to be strip piecing. And so I make sure my fabric is hanging right. I'm demoing how I do that to you right there. You turn it and fold it, and I use my shape cut ruler. It's a June Taylor product. I know this is going to sound like a commercial and nobody's paying me, but I have found coupons or Walmart is the best place to buy them. And some people don't like them. They say they're not accurate enough. I find them very accurate. So it might be user. I don't know. If you practice with it, mine are accurate. Anyway, pressing, I press all the worst of the mess out of the, I only do 3 strips worth because I'm only going to cut out 3 strips. So I don't press the whole piece of fabric. 1, 2, 3, I cut 3.5, 7, and 10.5 because then I pick up my strips and I put them. And as you build those strips into a row, you start seeing how pretty your quilt is going to be. And it is just this happy part of the process. So cutting, cutting, cutting. Here we go. And there they are. I am trying now to decide what order I'm going to want to put them in. And later I'll show you samples of what I don't like and what I do like. Whatever you put in the middle, that's what you're going to see on the trip. That's where your eye goes. That's what has the most impact on your brain as you look at it. So I want the motif and the blues to be the middle of the trip. Here I am putting them right sides together. I lay them out in the order I'm going to sew them. I take 2s at a time and I just hurry and sew them in strip piecing, the whole strip. So that's what you're watching me do. And sewing, getting all these strips into 2s until the end. And see that little blue on the end is going to be left out because there's not a friend for it because I have an odd number. So I bring them back, make sure they're in order because as I've told you before, I have a little dyslexia and I don't want to have to unpick. So I am careful not to goof. So as I get them sewn together, what I'm trying to do is make a set. I'm making a set of strips, and here I am sewing the last part of that set. As soon as I get it done, then I will have a whole set to look at so that I know I don't mess up the rest of what I'm doing. And when you're making a king size quilt, this is a really important step. When you're making a baby quilt, I mean, it's kind of important, but not as. So putting them there now that I know I'm going to know exactly where to put them and exactly where to sew them because I've done one strip set and I have it as a reference. So you're just watching me pick them up and get them ready to go sew. When you're sewing strips that are going to be squares and there's nothing tricky in any kind of piecing involved, then there's the little secret again that if you don't have an accurate 1/4 inch, it isn't going to affect your sewing so much. So the trick is whatever size seam you're sewing, be consistent with yourself. So okay, I'm really good at sewing 1/4 inch seams if I want to, but my foot doesn't like it as much. So I sew these a little bigger than a 1/4 inch just because I like to hit my foot in a different place better. So as long as I'm consistent with myself, these squares are going to fit together beautifully and nobody will ever know. And again, there really are no quilt police at anybody's house. Do what you want. As long as you're not doing a tricky quilt block, it's not going to matter. Just truly choose a seam size and be consistent with yourself. Consistency is the key to making these all fit together beautifully. Now that we have 3 strip sets pieced, it's time to press them. And I've heard that some people skip this step, although I can't imagine, but you just press them. You press them carefully, make sure you can see I'm not distorting, but I'm tugging a little. I don't want any folds or any inaccurate pressing here. So pressing is something I do really well and really fast. If you're not as good at it yet, just know that you will develop muscle memory and you will get good at it. So don't give up. Be a good presser and make sure your seams are pressed open. You don't want any problems with pressing. Pressing really does matter for accuracy. So after they're all pressed, I get it ready. I fold it, and I'm showing you now. I fold it so that my seams are staggered. So you don't want to fold on a seam or it'll make all your seams line up. You want every seam to be staggered so that as you cut it, see how they're in different places laying? You want it to be in different places laying. And I'm using a regular ruler because this was too long for the June Taylor ruler. So regular ruler, here you come, it's your job. 3.5 inches is what I'm doing. So I'm going to cut the strip sets at 3.5 inches. And what this does is get them ready to sew the other direction. And if you've never done strip piecing before, this is what makes it look like you have slaved and worked so hard. And okay, maybe, but it's just one of those secrets that quilting has that makes you look so talented to non-quilters. But the truth is you just sewed some strip sets together, pressed them, and cut them the other direction. And magically, mystically, I now have strip sets that have 9 blocks sewn together, ready to rock and roll to make the rest of this quilt. The next step in the process is to get the guide strip. So I put black in the middle so you can see, but I really want blue in the middle. And you need 1 center, so I have to take off the blue, and then it's too long for the width I want, so I'm taking off both sides of the ends. And here I go. I'm going to sew that together, and I will have my guide strip for the rest of making this quilt. This is a really important part of the process. I now have 15 squares on my guide strip, so I counted out so that I have 30 strip sets. I now sew all 30 of them end to end and make them into little tubes. So I cut them apart and get them ready, and I'm going to do something now which is a little bit controversial for some people. You'll see me do it right. I'm using my scissors. By right, I mean the way normal people do it. I'm using my scissors and cutting the strip sets apart in the proper place so that I can lay them out for the pattern. However, now this is how I really do it. I rip them. So I rip them because my stitch length is 2.5 and they rip really well if you support it with your thumb. So be careful. I've never torn fabric doing it, and it's faster, and I'm all about speed. So rip, rip, rip. Yeah, I know. Don't call the quilt, please. Again. I really know that this is more confusing than I'm making it look. you take 4 and you keep building the pattern. And you have to make sure that you rip between the proper 2. So take your time with this, watch your guide strip, and have fun. And if you goof, it's just a seam. Go sew it back up and rip it in the right place. It won't matter. So lay out your whole quilt and watch this beauty come together. As you do it, I want you to watch how the yellow trips together. The whole thing goes around together. That's why I like them to have friends. They're holding hands and you see them holding hands. The blue, the light blue almost trips on its own, but it's just enough of a friend to stick close to those other 2 blues that are tripping together. And as you watch the colors come together, you can see that they trip depending on how they're friends with or not with the one next to them. Now I pin. When I only do this with baby quilts. Otherwise, if it's a bigger one, it's different. But since we're just learning about baby quilts today, I pin every strip set next to each other with the place I need to sew the seam. So I do half the quilt and then I go and I pin the other half of the quilt. And that is how I get it ready. I carry the whole thing to my sewing machine and I sew it. This is me teaching you to budge. Every single seam, you have to budge those 2 seams next to each other. And watch, I'm pushing the bottom seam for this one up and the top seam down. And then they click into place and you budge them next to each other. This is me realizing I started on the side I don't want to start on. It's not right or wrong. It's just a personal preference. And in a while, I'll tell you and show you why. So I started on the other side again, so it looks like I'm doing the first 2, but it's really the other side. And I'm budging them together again. I have the bottom up, the top down, and if you budge them, and if you hold them with your finger, cotton, because it's 100%, you can see there's a little bit extra in the bottom there. It just eases into itself and it makes it so it looks like you are seamstress of the year. Your corners will just be beautiful when you're done. See how nice they look? It's amazing. Okay, now you're seeing why I prefer it this way. See how as it sews, the ones I haven't sewn yet are on top and the ones I have sewn are on bottom. I just find they travel better as I sew them together if I do them from that side. So that's why I switch sides. Here you're just watching me budge them some more. This is a little slower than when you're string piecing the straight strings because you have to be careful with every single seam. Some people pin these, but I don't find that helpful for me because they all need to be budged and then they all need to be eased so that they can sew together. My friend calls this reverse budging because I taught her the other way first. You put the seam, every other one goes the opposite direction because when I turn this over, you'll see. You want one to go up and then the next one to go down. One to go up, the next one to go down. And as you're watching this, also watch how I'm pressing. I'm stay pressing over the top and then I'm pressing it flat with my iron. So see how the back goes seam up, seam down, seam up. That just helps your quilt to lay flat and it helps it to lay happy and it helps it to be happy. Now, just for those of you who are going to ask, yes, eventually I will put batting in this quilt and I will put a backing in this quilt, but right now I'm just going to make the top for you. Okay, this is where I sewed that other end first, and so I have it crossed and you saw me. Just press over it. It is never worth taking anything out. So yes, if you make a mistake, press it. It'll work anyway. You don't have to worry about it and you don't have to care. It just works. See, it's to the right and they're happy. Okay, with the magic of YouTube, I'm not going to make you watch me sew the other half together. I'm just going to do it while you're not looking. What I will show you is I will show you that I sew the guide strip to half of the quilt. And then when we go back, the other half will be sewn together and I will finish the quilt. So you do this seam, whichever way you've pressed that first half, you have the seams go the opposite direction. And then when you press the second half, make sure it's pressed in the right direction to match that guide strip's pressing. Here I am, last seam of the quilt, and it will be like, ta-da, magical, mystical. And the more you sew these quilts, the faster they go and the happier they are, and you get to just see them come to life. Here it is, done. If you want to put a border on it, you could. I don't want to. I'm showing you now how they trip together. You can see why it's fun. The white kind of trips by itself. The black and gray trip together, and the black stands out, but it still has friends, and so it's not everyone tripping separately. Next, I'm going to show you something I really don't like. When you do it like this, what you see is a plus sign. It's not really wrong. Famous quilters all over the world do it this way. Look on the internet. I just don't, that's what you see, and I don't want to see a plus sign. So I'm really careful not to do two colors in the middle of a quilt. Here, you can put one color in the middle of a quilt if you have two colors around it, and then see how the yellow didn't cause a plus sign? It made the trip look, and I prefer that. So if you only have two colors and you want them in the middle of the quilt, maybe put a center and then do it. Here is the quilt we made. It doesn't have a plus sign. I love it. I hope you do too. Have so much fun making a trip quilt. Stay merry and creative.